Sarah Martinez adjusted her backpack straps as she approached the security checkpoint at the Pentagon. At 23, she looked even younger with her petite frame, casual jeans, and sneakers. Her long, dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore no makeup. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another college student who had somehow wandered into the wrong building. The two security guards at the main entrance were having a slow afternoon. Officer Mike Reynolds, a burly man in his 40s with graying temples, was telling his partner about his weekend fishing trip when he noticed Sarah approaching. Officer Jake Peterson, younger and more cynical, followed his gaze and immediately straightened up with a smirk. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Jake muttered under his breath, loud enough for Mike to hear. "Looks like someone's lost their way to the campus tour." Sarah reached the checkpoint and calmly placed her ID card on the scanner. The machine beeped, indicating it was processing the information. While they waited for the system to respond, Jake leaned back in his chair with an amused expression. "Miss, I think you might be in the wrong building," Jake said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The Smithsonian is about 10 miles that way, and Georgetown University is even further. This is a restricted government facility." Mike chuckled, assuming Sarah was indeed a confused tourist or student. "Honey, you need special clearance to be in here. This isn't a place where you can just walk in for a selfie." Sarah remained silent, her expression calm and professional. She had encountered this reaction before, though not quite this blatantly disrespectful. Her youthful appearance had always been both a blessing and a curse in her line of work. While it helped her blend into certain environments during missions, it also meant constantly proving herself to people who judged her based on looks alone. "I'm sorry, but I need to see some proper identification," Jake continued, clearly enjoying himself. "A student ID from whatever college you're attending isn't going to cut it here. We can't have random kids wandering around taking pictures for their Instagram accounts." The scanner continued processing, its blue light flickering as it accessed various databases. Sarah noticed the slight delay, which usually meant the system was performing additional verification checks. She knew exactly why it was taking longer than usual. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside," Mike said, now taking the situation more seriously but still assuming she was simply lost. "We need to call someone to escort you out. This is a secure facility, and unauthorized personnel can face serious charges for being here." Jake was practically grinning now. $20 says she's one of those YouTube pranksters trying to see how far she can get into government buildings. The internet has made kids think they can do anything for views. "I'm actually here on official business," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady and professional. It was the first time she had spoken since arriving at the checkpoint. Both guards burst into laughter. Jake slapped his knee dramatically. "Official business? Kid, you look like you should be worried about your midterm exams, not national security matters. What's your official business? Did you lose your pet hamster and think it might have wandered into the Pentagon?" Mike tried to be slightly more professional, though he was clearly amused. "Miss, I appreciate your imagination, but you're going to need to come with us. We'll call your parents and get you safely back to wherever you came from." The scanner suddenly emitted a different tone, longer and more complex than the usual beep. Both guards looked at the screen, expecting to see an error message or perhaps a student ID that would confirm their suspicions. Instead, the screen began displaying something that made Jake's smirk fade immediately. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, leaning closer to the monitor. The display showed Sarah's official government credentials, but that wasn't what caught their attention. Below her information, a special emblem began to glow on the screen. It was a classified designation that both guards had heard about but never actually seen in person. Mike's casual demeanor evaporated instantly. "Holy shit," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The emblem continued to pulse with a soft golden light, indicating a level of clearance that superseded almost every other classification in the building. It was the kind of authorization that meant the person carrying it had direct access to the highest levels of government and military operations. Jake's face went pale as he read the additional information appearing on the screen. Sarah wasn't just any government employee. She was an active field operative with one of the most elite and secretive divisions in the intelligence community. Her age wasn't a mistake or coincidence. She had been recruited specifically because of her ability to blend in and appear harmless. "Agent Martinez," Mike stammered, suddenly standing at attention. We had no idea. I apologize for any inconvenience. Sarah picked up her ID card as the scanner released it, her expression unchanged. No need to apologize. You were doing your job. However, I would appreciate if we could proceed quickly. I have a meeting with Director Harrison in 10 minutes. The mention of Director Harrison made both guards exchange nervous glances. Harrison was the deputy director of the entire facility, someone whose name was spoken in hushed tones throughout the building. The fact that this young woman had a direct meeting with him confirmed that they had seriously underestimated her importance. Jake fumbled with the security protocols, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Of course, Agent Martinez, right away. Do you need an escort to the director's office? That won't be necessary, Sarah replied calmly. I know the way. As she walked through the checkpoint, both guards watched in stunned silence. The girl they had been mocking just minutes earlier was apparently one of the most highly classified operatives in the building. Mike felt his stomach drop as he realized how close they had come to creating an international incident through their casual discrimination. Did we just mock a federal agent? Jake whispered once Sarah was out of earshot. Mike nodded grimly. Not just any federal agent. Did you see that clearance level? I've been working security for 15 years and I've never seen anything like that. She could probably have us transferred to a research station in Antarctica with one phone call. Sarah continued down the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished marble floor. She was used to people underestimating her, but today's encounter had been particularly grating. She had more important things to worry about than the hurt feelings of security guards, though. The mission briefing she was about to receive would likely send her to another dangerous location where her youthful appearance would once again be her greatest asset. Behind her, the two guards were frantically reviewing security protocols, hoping they hadn't violated any regulations in their treatment of a high-level operative. They spent the rest of their shift jumping every time someone approached the checkpoint, paranoid that word of their embarrassing mistake had spread throughout the building. What they didn't know was that Sarah had already forgotten about the incident entirely. Her mind was focused on the classified folder waiting for her in Director Harrison's office, and the mission that would take her halfway around the world before the week was over. In her line of work, being underestimated wasn't an insult, it was her most powerful weapon. Director Harrison's office occupied an entire corner of the 7th floor, with bulletproof windows offering a panoramic view of the Virginia landscape. At 62, Harrison had spent 4 decades in intelligence work, climbing from field operative to one of the most powerful positions in American national security. His silver hair was always perfectly styled, and his expensive suits never showed a wrinkle, even during 18-hour workdays. When Sarah knocked on his door, Harrison looked up from a stack of classified documents that would have given most people nightmares. Despite his intimidating reputation, he had always treated Sarah with the respect her skills deserved, never once commenting on her age or appearance. "Agent Martinez, right on time," Harrison said, gesturing to the chair across from his massive oak desk. "I trust security didn't give you any trouble downstairs." Sarah took her seat and shook her head. "Nothing I haven't encountered before, sir." Harrison studied her for a moment, noting the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested the encounter had been more than routine. In his experience, the best operatives were often those who looked least like what people expected a spy to be. Sarah's ability to appear harmless had been the key to her success in some of the most dangerous operations of the past 5 years. "I'm sending you to Prague," Harrison said without preamble, sliding a thick manila folder across the desk. "We have a situation that requires your particular set of skills." Sarah opened the folder and began scanning the contents. Photographs of European cityscapes, surveillance reports, and psychological profiles of various individuals filled the pages. At the center of it all was a single name that made her pause: Viktor Kozlov. "Kozlov is planning something big," Harrison continued, watching Sarah's reaction carefully. "Our sources indicate he's been recruiting young people for what he claims is a legitimate business venture. University students, recent graduates, people who are idealistic and desperate for opportunities." Viktor Kozlov was a name that appeared in intelligence briefings like a recurring nightmare. The 48-year-old Russian had spent the last decade building a network that operated in the gray areas between legitimate business and international crime. He was too smart to get directly involved in anything obviously illegal, but his associates had connections to everything from arms dealing to human trafficking. What makes this different from his usual operations? Sarah asked, studying a surveillance photo of Kozlov entering an expensive hotel in Prague. He's specifically targeting Americans this time, Harrison replied grimly. We've identified at least 12 young people who have disappeared after accepting job offers from his organization. All of them were college-educated, spoke multiple languages, and came from middle-class families. The kind of people whose disappearances generate media attention and congressional inquiries. Sarah flipped through more photographs, recognizing the pattern immediately. Young, intelligent Americans who would have been perfect recruits for legitimate international businesses. The fact that they had all vanished suggested something much darker than a simple job scam. The Czech authorities are cooperating, but they're walking on eggshells, Harrison continued. Kozlov has enough legitimate business interests in Prague that they can't move against him without solid evidence. That's where you come in. Cover identity? Sarah asked, already anticipating the answer. Harrison smiled grimly. Graduate student in international relations, looking for an internship with a European company. You'll be staying at the University of Prague student housing and attending some actual classes to maintain your cover. Your legend is solid. We've been building it for 6 months in case we needed to deploy you in an academic environment. Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity of the operation. Maintaining a cover identity as a student required extensive preparation, from creating academic records to establishing social media presence that would stand up to scrutiny. The fact that they had been preparing this particular legend for months indicated they had suspected Kozlov would eventually target American students. What's the timeline? She asked. You leave tomorrow night. We have intelligence suggesting Kozlov's people will be conducting interviews at the university within the next 2 weeks. You need to be in position to apply for whatever positions they're offering. Sarah studied the psychological profile of Viktor Kozlov, noting his preferences and behavioral patterns. Like many successful criminals, he was intelligent, charismatic, and particularly skilled at identifying and exploiting the vulnerabilities of others. He targeted people who were ambitious but naive, offering them opportunities that seemed too good to be true because they usually were. Sir, what's our extraction plan if things go sideways? Sarah asked, a question that had become routine after too many operations that had deviated from their original parameters. Harrison's expression darkened. Standard protocols are in place, but Sarah, this one feels different. Kozlov isn't just running a scam or even a trafficking operation. Our analysts believe he's building something bigger, possibly recruiting for a long-term intelligence operation against American interests. The implications hung heavy in the air. If Kozlov was recruiting young Americans for intelligence purposes, it meant he was working for someone with resources and patience. The kind of operation that could take years to develop and decades to fully understand. Has anyone attempted to infiltrate his organization before? Sarah asked. The Germans tried 2 years ago. Their operative was experienced, highly trained, but... Harrison paused, choosing his words carefully. He was also 35 years old and looked like exactly what he was, a government agent trying to pose as something he wasn't. Kozlov saw through the deception within a week. Sarah understood the implication immediately. Her youthful appearance wasn't just an asset for this mission. It was essential. Kozlov's organization specifically targeted young people because they were easier to manipulate and less likely to be experienced operatives. An older agent would stand out like a flashing warning sign. What happened to the German operative? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. He disappeared. His body was found 3 months later in the Danube River. Officially, it was ruled a suicide, but the autopsy results were inconsistent with that conclusion. Sarah closed the folder and looked directly at Harrison. Despite the dangers, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with accepting a challenging assignment. This was why she had joined the intelligence community, why she had spent years training and proving herself. Missions like this were exactly what she had been born to do. I'll need 48 hours to review all the materials and prepare my cover story, she said. Harrison nodded. Everything you need is in that folder, plus additional materials that will be delivered to your apartment tonight. Sarah, I want you to understand something. This isn't just about stopping Kozlov's current operation. We believe he's connected to something much larger, possibly a coordinated effort to infiltrate American institutions at multiple levels. The weight of the mission settled on Sarah's shoulders. She wasn't just going to Prague to rescue a few missing students. She was potentially uncovering a threat to national security that could have ramifications for years to come. "One more thing," Harrison added as Sarah stood to leave. "Your contact in Prague will be a Czech intelligence officer named Thomas Novik. He's been tracking Kozlov for 3 years and knows his patterns better than anyone. But Sarah, trust your instincts above everything else. If something feels wrong, get out immediately." Sarah tucked the folder under her arm and headed for the door. As she reached for the handle, Harrison called out one final instruction. "Agent Martinez, I know I don't need to say this, but you're walking into a situation where being underestimated could mean the difference between success and failure. Use every advantage you have." As Sarah left the director's office, she was already mentally preparing for the transformation from federal agent to naive graduate student. By tomorrow night, she would be Sarah Collins, a 23-year-old American studying international relations and desperately hopping for an internship opportunity in Prague. The real Sarah Martinez would effectively cease to exist until the mission was complete. The hallway seemed longer as she walked back toward the elevators, her mind racing through the details she would need to master. Language patterns, cultural references, academic knowledge, everything would need to be perfect. One slip one moment where her training showed through her cover, and she could end up like the German operative who had tried this mission before her. But as the elevator doors closed and she began her descent back to the ground level, Sarah felt confident in her abilities. She had spent 5 years becoming one of the most effective field operatives in the agency precisely because she could become someone else completely. Tomorrow night, she would disappear into the role of lifetime, and Viktor Kozlov would never see her coming. Prague's ancient cobblestone streets gleamed with morning rain as Sarah made her way to the University of Prague campus. For 2 weeks, she had been living the life of Sarah Collins, attending lectures on European political systems and sharing coffee with fellow students in cramped dormitory common rooms. Her cover was so complete that even she sometimes forgot about the encrypted communication device hidden in her textbook binding. The advertisement had appeared on the university job board exactly as the intelligence reports had predicted. International business opportunity, seeking bright young minds for European expansion project. The posting promised excellent compensation, travel opportunities, and the chance to work with established business leaders across multiple countries. To desperate graduate students drowning in debt, it looked like a golden ticket to their future careers. Sarah had submitted her application along with 30 other students, carefully crafting her essay to demonstrate exactly the right balance of ambition and naivety that would appeal to Viktor Kozlov's recruiters. She portrayed herself as someone who desperately wanted to succeed, but lacked the experience to recognize potential dangers. The interview location was a renovated building in Prague's business district, the kind of modern office space that legitimate international companies favored. Sarah arrived precisely on time, wearing a conservative business outfit that made her look even younger than her 23 years. She carried a leather portfolio that contained her fake academic credentials and a carefully rehearsed personal history. Thomas Novik, her Czech intelligence contact, was positioned across the street in a surveillance van disguised as a telecommunications repair vehicle. They had met only once, in a crowded tourist cafe where they had posed as strangers sharing a table. Novik was a 15-year veteran of Czech intelligence, with the patient demeanor of someone who had learned that the most important intelligence work involved endless hours of careful observation. "Collins is entering the building," Novik spoke quietly into his microphone. "Target building shows normal activity levels." Inside the office building, Sarah was directed to a waiting room that looked like something from an expensive business magazine. Leather furniture, contemporary art, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of Prague's historic skyline. Everything was designed to impress young people who had never experienced genuine corporate luxury. 6 other students waited with her, all Americans or Western Europeans who fit the same demographic profile. Sarah recognized the nervous energy that came from people who desperately wanted something they couldn't afford to lose. These weren't experienced professionals who could afford to walk away from a questionable opportunity. They were young people facing mountains of student debt and uncertain career prospects. Sarah Collins, a woman in an expensive suit, appeared in the doorway. She was in her 30s with the kind of polished appearance that suggested success and sophistication. "I'm Alina Petrov. Mr. Kozlov is ready to see you now." Sarah followed Alina through a corridor lined with photographs of European business leaders and politicians. Some of the faces were ones she recognized from intelligence briefings, individuals who had been investigated for various forms of international crime. The message was clear. This organization had connections at the highest levels of European society. Viktor Kozlov's office occupied the entire top floor of the building. The man himself was exactly what Sarah had expected based on his psychological profile: tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successfully manipulating others. His smile was warm and genuine, the smile of someone who truly enjoyed meeting young people with bright futures ahead of them. "Miss Collins, please sit down," Kozlov said in accented but perfect English. "I've read your application materials, and I must say you have exactly the kind of background we're looking for." Sarah took the offered chair and opened her portfolio with slightly nervous hands, a gesture she had practiced to convey the right level of inexperience. "Thank you, Mr. Kozlov. I'm very excited about the opportunity to work in international business." Kozlov leaned back in his chair, studying her with the intensity of someone who made his living by reading people. "Tell me, Sarah, what do you know about the challenges facing American businesses in European markets?" For the next 20 minutes, Sarah carefully walked the tightrope between demonstrating intelligence and revealing too much knowledge. She discussed economic policies and cultural barriers with the insight of a graduate student who had done her research, while avoiding the kind of detailed analysis that would suggest professional experience in international affairs. "Impressive," Kozlov said finally. "You clearly understand the complexities of cross-cultural business relationships. That's exactly what we need for our expansion project." "Could you tell me more about the specific position?" Sarah asked, allowing a hint of eagerness to creep into her voice. Kozlov stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked out over the city. "We're establishing a network of American cultural centers across Eastern Europe, places where young Americans can help bridge the gap between our cultures while gaining valuable international experience." The explanation sounded reasonable, even admirable, but Sarah noticed the carefully vague language that avoided specific details. Legitimate business operations typically provided clear job descriptions and organizational structures. Kozlov's offer was deliberately ambiguous, allowing potential recruits to fill in the blanks with their own hopeful assumptions. "The position would involve significant travel," Kozlov continued, turning back to face her. "You would be based here in Prague initially, but your work would take you to Hungary, Poland, Romania, and several other countries. You would be helping to establish these cultural centers and recruit other young Americans to join our expanding network." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The pattern was becoming clear: young Americans recruited to establish operations in multiple countries, with each new recruit helping to bring in others. It was a classic structure for either a pyramid scheme or something much more dangerous. "That sounds amazing," Sarah said, maintaining her enthusiastic student persona. "When would I be able to start?" "Immediately," Kozlov replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "In fact, we have a group of new recruits leaving for Budapest tomorrow evening. You could join them and begin your training right away." The speed of the timeline was another red flag. Legitimate employers typically required background checks, reference verification, and administrative processing that took weeks or months. Kozlov was clearly operating under pressure to recruit people quickly, before they had time to research his organization or ask too many questions. "I would need to arrange things with the university," Sarah said hesitantly. "My professors are expecting me to complete the semester." "Of course," Kozlov said smoothly. "We have relationships with several European universities that will provide academic credit for your work experience. You won't lose any progress toward your degree." Sarah pretended to consider the offer while actually analyzing the office for security cameras, exit routes, and potential weapons. She counted at least 4 surveillance devices and noticed that the windows were reinforced with security glass. Whatever Kozlov's operation involved, he was clearly prepared for trouble. "Mr. Kozlov, I have to ask, this opportunity seems almost too good to be true. The compensation you mentioned, the travel opportunities, the career advancement potential. What exactly would you expect from me in return?" Kozlov's smile became predatory for just a moment before returning to its previous warmth. Loyalty, Sarah. This organization succeeds because our people are completely committed to our mission. We invest heavily in our recruits because we expect them to invest themselves completely in our work. The word choice was telling. Kozlov hadn't said employees or team members. He had said recruits, the language of military or ideological organizations. Combined with his emphasis on loyalty and complete commitment, Sarah was becoming convinced that this was indeed the intelligence operation that Harrison had suspected. "I understand," Sarah said slowly. "Complete commitment to the mission." "Exactly," Kozlov replied, moving back to his desk. "Sarah, I'm going to offer you this position right now. The salary is 50,000 euros per year, plus housing, travel expenses, and performance bonuses that could double your compensation. You would start as a junior cultural liaison and have opportunities for rapid advancement based on your results." 50,000 euros was more money than most graduate students could imagine earning immediately after university. For someone facing student loan payments and an uncertain job market, it would be an irresistible offer. Sarah allowed herself to look appropriately stunned by the generous compensation package. That's incredible," she stammered. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Kozlov said simply. "Say yes, and tomorrow night you'll be on a train to Budapest, beginning the most important work of your life." Sarah looked around the office one more time, noting details she would need to remember for her debriefing. Maps on the wall showed routes through Eastern Europe with various locations marked in red. File cabinets bore labels in multiple languages, suggesting documents related to operations across several countries. Most importantly, she noticed a computer terminal displaying what appeared to be a database of names and photographs, likely the other young Americans who had already been recruited. "Mr. Kozlov," Sarah said finally, "I accept your offer." Kozlov's smile became genuine for the first time during their meeting. "Excellent choice, Sarah. Elena will provide you with all the necessary paperwork and travel arrangements. Welcome to the organization." As Sarah was escorted out of the building by Elena, her mind was already racing with the intelligence she had gathered. Kozlov's operation was clearly much larger than anyone had suspected, with established networks across multiple countries and sophisticated recruitment protocols. The missing Americans weren't just victims of a scam. They were being systematically recruited for some kind of coordinated intelligence operation. Outside the building, Sarah walked calmly toward the nearest metro station, following the predetermined route that would take her to the safe house where Thomas Novak was waiting. She had successfully infiltrated Kozlov's organization, but she knew the real danger was just beginning. Tomorrow night, she would be on a train to Budapest, surrounded by other recruits who had no idea they were potentially walking into a trap. As she descended into the metro station, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the train window. The young woman looking back at her appeared nervous and excited, exactly what someone would expect from a graduate student who had just landed an incredible job opportunity. The two security guards at the Pentagon would never have imagined that this same unremarkable young woman was now preparing to uncover one of the most sophisticated intelligence threats facing American interests in Europe. The train pulled into the station, and Sarah stepped aboard with the satisfied knowledge that being underestimated had once again become her greatest advantage. Viktor Kozlov had looked at her and seen exactly what she wanted him to see, a naive American student who could be easily manipulated and controlled. By tomorrow night, she would be deep inside his organization, gathering the evidence needed to bring down an operation that had been targeting American youth for months. As Prague's ancient buildings flashed past the train windows, Sarah began mentally preparing for the most dangerous phase of her mission. She had successfully gotten inside Kozlov's organization, but now she would need to maintain her cover while surrounded by potential enemies, gathering intelligence that could save the lives of dozens of missing Americans and prevent countless others from disappearing into the same network of shadows.